Charlotte Bennet had not set foot in Marlow for nearly a decade. The small village seemed frozen in time, untouched by the world she had faced beyond its borders. Yet now, an invitation had called her back. A family reunion that promised awkward encounters and long-buried memories. More than anything, Charlotte worried about how her son Lucas would face the people who had once judged him so harshly. Lucas was different from other boys in Marlow. His speech impediment made him quiet and hesitant. For years, the villagers whispered behind their hands, misunderstanding the boy's silence for something worse. Charlotte had spent those years shielding Lucas from gossip and cruelty, carving out a safe space far away. But now, returning felt like stepping into a storm. As the car rolled down the winding lanes into the village, Lucas pressed his forehead against the window, watching the familiar sights with wide eyes. Charlotte reached out to squeeze his hand gently. "We're here now," she said softly. "We'll face this together." Yet even as she spoke, Charlotte wondered if courage would be enough. The village hall was decorated with faded banners and worn photographs, remnants of reunions long gone. Charlotte stepped inside, clutching Lucas's hand tightly. The room buzzed with hushed conversations and uneasy glances. Faces she once knew stared back, some with curiosity, others with cold distance. Time had changed them, but the weight of old judgments remained heavy. Lucas hung back, shrinking slightly as a group of cousins eyed him from across the room. Their whispers barely reached Charlotte's ears, but she caught the sharpness in their tones. She could see the way they avoided Lucas's gaze, as if his silence was a mark of shame rather than struggle. Charlotte's own brother, Richard, approached with a stiff smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Charlotte," he said, voice low, "it's been a while." "It has," Charlotte replied evenly. "Thank you for the invitation." Richard glanced at Lucas briefly, then back to Charlotte. "He looks well." Charlotte forced a small smile. "He's growing stronger every day." The reunion continued with forced pleasantries, laughter that felt brittle, and memories carefully shelved. Yet beneath the surface, Charlotte sensed the undercurrent of resentment and misunderstanding. Years of absence had done little to soften old wounds. Later, as the evening wore on, Lucas slipped away from the crowded room and found refuge near the edge of the garden. The twilight cast long shadows, and the cool air whispered through the leaves. Charlotte followed quietly, finding him staring at the stars. "Feeling all right?" she asked gently. Lucas hesitated before nodding. "It's hard," he admitted. "They don't understand me." Charlotte wrapped an arm around his shoulder. "I know, love. But we have each other." Just then, a voice called from behind them. "You should speak up more, Lucas." They turned to see Tom, a cousin known for his sharp tongue. His smirk was a fresh reminder of the judgment Lucas had faced for years. Charlotte stepped forward, protective. "We're here to enjoy the evening, Tom. Please be kind." Tom shrugged, unfazed. "Just saying what everyone's thinking." Charlotte's heart clenched. The battle was only beginning. The next morning dawned gray and damp, the village cloaked in mist. Charlotte watched Lucas from the kitchen window as he wandered the garden, lost in thought. The previous night's words from Tom echoed in her mind. How much longer could Lucas stay silent and endure the weight of others' scorn? Charlotte decided today must be different. Over breakfast, she gently broached the subject with Lucas. "What if you entered the school's speech competition? It could be a chance to tell your story." Lucas looked down at his cereal, hesitation clouding his face. "What if I fail? What if they laugh?" She reached across the table and took his hand. "You won't be alone. I'll be there every step." Later that day, Charlotte visited the school. She met Mrs. Langley, Lucas's teacher, who welcomed the idea warmly. "Lucas is bright and kind," she said. "He deserves to be heard." As the days passed, Charlotte and Lucas practiced his speech in quiet moments, each word a small victory. Yet the more Lucas prepared, the more the shadow of doubt grew. What if the villagers refused to listen? What if the reunion rekindled old prejudices? One evening, as they sat together by the fire, Lucas confided, "Sometimes I wish I could be like the other boys. Speak without fear." Charlotte smiled softly. "You already are braver than most. This is your chance to show them who you really are." But the road ahead was steep, and the echoes of the past whispered doubts louder than hope. Days passed with uneasy calm, but the reunion's undercurrents of judgment never truly faded. Lucas and Charlotte walked the village streets together, feeling the weight of eyes that lingered too long or glanced away too quickly. Whispers trailed behind them like shadows, unseen but deeply felt. At the local cafe, a few old neighbors exchanged quiet remarks when Lucas accidentally spilled his drink. The incident was small, but to Charlotte, it symbolized the constant scrutiny they endured. She could see the mixture of pity and disapproval in their eyes, a silent reminder that Lucas's difference marked him as other. That evening, Charlotte found herself sitting alone by the fireplace in the guest house where they stayed. The flickering flame seemed to echo her restless thoughts. Lucas's silence wasn't just about his speech impediment. It was about years of being misunderstood and isolated. A knock on the door broke her reverie. Lucas entered quietly, clutching a small notebook. "I wrote something," he said softly. "Would you like to hear it?" Charlotte's heart lifted. She nodded encouragingly. Lucas cleared his throat and began to read. His voice was tentative at first, but grew steadier with every word. "I am not my silence. I am the words I've yet to say. The courage I carry inside, though it hides beneath the fear." Charlotte felt tears prick her eyes. This was more than a speech, it was Lucas's truth, laid bare in fragile verses. The next day, Charlotte shared the notebook with Mrs. Langley, who smiled warmly. "Lucas has a powerful voice," she said. "We'll make sure everyone hears it." But outside the safety of the school, the village still held its breath, waiting to see if Lucas could break free from the shadows. The morning air was crisp as Lucas and Charlotte prepared for the reunion. The village hall, decorated with faded banners and homemade bunting, stood as a quiet reminder of memories long buried. The familiar faces that awaited them held stories, some kind, others cruel. Lucas felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Every step towards the hall was heavier than the last. The whispers from the village seemed louder now, the judgment sharper. But Charlotte's steady hand on his shoulder grounded him. Inside, the reunion buzzed with tentative greetings and awkward smiles. Old friends exchanged cautious pleasantries, while family members eyed Lucas with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. His silence seemed to speak louder than words. As the evening wore on, Lucas found himself cornered by James, his uncle, whose harsh tone cut through the chatter. "You never should have left," James said, voice low and cold. "You've always been a disappointment." Lucas's heart pounded, but he met the gaze firmly. "Maybe I was silent before, but I'm not invisible." The room fell into a hush. All eyes turned to Lucas, waiting for what he would say next. Charlotte squeezed his hand. This was the moment they had prepared for. The moment Lucas would break the cycle of stigma. Drawing a breath, Lucas stepped forward. "I've been quiet for too long because I was afraid. Afraid of being judged for something I cannot change. But I am more than my silence. I am strength. I am hope." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some faces softened, others remained hard, but none could ignore the courage in Lucas's voice. The reunion had changed. And so had Lucas. The days following the reunion were filled with a quiet but growing change. Word of Lucas's speech spread through Whitfield, stirring conversations that had long been buried beneath assumptions and old prejudices. Some villagers approached Charlotte and Lucas with apologies, others with guarded curiosity, but all were beginning to see a different side to the boy they once overlooked. At school, Lucas found himself met with new respect from classmates who had once kept their distance. He no longer felt like a shadow moving silently through the corridors but a presence to be acknowledged. His confidence grew with each passing day, nurtured by small moments of kindness and understanding. Charlotte noticed the subtle transformation in her son and felt a cautious hope blooming. She joined a local community group focused on raising awareness about speech difficulties and social stigma. Together, they organized events to educate and unite the village, turning whispers of judgment into conversations of empathy. But change was not without resistance. Some villagers clung stubbornly to old biases, their harsh words a reminder that the journey ahead was far from over. Charlotte and Lucas faced challenges that tested their resolve, yet each setback only strengthened their determination. One afternoon, as Lucas practiced his speech in the garden, a group of children approached hesitantly. Their leader, a boy named Ethan, stepped forward and said, "We want to learn from you." Lucas smiled shyly but nodded. The ripple of courage had begun to spread beyond the reunion hall, reaching hearts ready to listen and grow. The village of Whitfield, with its cobbled streets and centuries-old cottages, had never seen such a storm of quiet change. Lucas's courage was a beacon that illuminated the cracks in the long-held prejudices of the community. Yet, the road to acceptance was far from smooth. Charlotte noticed how Lucas's days at school began to shift, but not always for the better. The initial curiosity and newfound respect from some classmates were often overshadowed by stares and whispered conversations behind his back. One afternoon, as Lucas walked home through the narrow lanes, a group of boys blocked his way. Their faces twisted with mockery and cruelty. "Still can't talk properly, can you?" sneered one boy, jabbing a finger close to Lucas's chest. Lucas's throat tightened, but he held his ground. "Maybe not. But I'm braver than you think." The boys laughed, but Lucas's defiance had unsettled them. He pushed past them, heart-pounding but resolute. At home, Charlotte sat with Lucas, her eyes shining with both pride and worry. "You are stronger than you know, Lucas. Every time you face them, you chip away at the walls they've built." Lucas nodded, his young face set with determination. "I want to help others like me. I don't want anyone to feel as lonely as I did." Inspired by this, Charlotte and Lucas began organizing workshops at the community center. They invited speech therapists, counselors, and families facing similar challenges. Each meeting became a sanctuary of understanding and solidarity. Stories were shared, tears shed, and laughter rediscovered. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the rolling hills, Lucas stood before a room full of villagers. His voice, steady and clear, carried words he had once feared to speak aloud. "I am not just the boy who struggles to talk. I am a voice for those who are unheard. Together, we can break the silence of stigma." The applause was warm, tentative at first, then growing in strength. Among the crowd, even the harshest critics found themselves moved. Yet, beneath the surface, old fears lingered. A letter arrived at Charlotte's door, anonymous and filled with threats disguised as warnings. The message was clear. Not everyone in Whitfield was ready to change. Charlotte read the letter silently, then folded it with resolve. "We've come too far to turn back now." Lucas looked up, eyes bright. "Then we keep going. No matter what." Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the promise of a new dawn. But the battle against stigma was far from over. The rain fell steadily over Whitfield, painting the cobblestones in shimmering gray and softening the edges of the village that had once seemed so unyielding. Inside the community hall, however, a storm of another kind was brewing. One of truth, confrontation, and the hope for transformation. Charlotte stood near the doorway, scanning the small crowd gathering inside. It had taken weeks to organize the open forum. The event was meant to bring awareness, to bridge divides, and to let those who had lived in silence speak without fear. But tension still hung in the air like damp fog. Lucas sat at the front, fidgeting slightly, his notes folded neatly in his lap. He wore the same navy jumper he had worn on the day he first spoke publicly. It had become his quiet armor. This time, though, the stakes felt heavier. Rumors had spread that the anonymous letter was only one of many. Some had even begun to question whether the community center should host these meetings at all. Still they came. Some out of curiosity, others out of quiet support. A few sat with folded arms and clenched jaws, faces etched with skepticism and discomfort. The hall quietened as Charlotte stepped forward, microphone in hand. "Good evening. Thank you for being here. This isn't just another meeting. This is a chance to listen. Not just with ears, but with heart. Because if we don't listen now, we risk losing something vital in our community. Compassion." She turned to Lucas and gave him a reassuring nod. Lucas rose slowly, his hands trembling just slightly, but his gaze steady. He walked to the center of the room, the hush thick around him. "My name is Lucas Wood," he began, his voice low but clear. "You all know me. Some of you mocked me. Some ignored me. Some stood by me. I've lived here all my life, but I was invisible until I found the strength to speak." He paused, scanning the room, locking eyes with people who had once turned away from him. "I have a speech disorder. It doesn't make me stupid. It doesn't make me weak. It just means I speak differently. But difference isn't something to fear. It's something to understand." There was a shift in the room. Shoulders relaxed. One woman dabbed her eyes with a tissue. An elderly man nodded silently, his arms unfolding as if letting go of decades of misunderstanding. Lucas continued, his voice now gaining strength. I used to think I was broken. But I'm not. I'm just different. And I'm not the only one. There are kids like me everywhere, hiding behind silence because they're afraid. Afraid of being mocked, excluded, or dismissed. He turned toward a whiteboard where he had drawn a simple diagram. 3 circles that overlapped in the center. Fear. Silence. Shame. That's what we live in. But when we speak, when you let us speak, those circles can be replaced with something better. Courage. Acceptance. Hope. A slow, steady applause began. No one had directed it. No one had prompted it. It just rose, like the morning sun breaking through rain clouds. Lucas stepped back, cheeks flushed, eyes glassy with emotion. Charlotte stepped forward again, embracing her son briefly before turning back to the crowd. I know not all of you agree with what we're doing. I've read your letters. I've heard the whispers. But look at what just happened here. A boy, once afraid to speak, just taught us all a lesson in strength. A woman in the back, Mrs. Penrose, the very woman who had once shamed Charlotte for failing as a mother, stood up slowly. I was wrong, she said quietly. I judged you without knowing your story. And I judged him without understanding his silence. Then others stood, one by one. They didn't offer speeches or apologies. Some simply placed their hand on Lucas's shoulder as they walked by. Others hugged Charlotte. It was not a perfect redemption. But it was the beginning. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky opened up, pale and golden. Lucas stepped out of the hall, looking up as the sun filtered through the clouds. Charlotte followed, standing beside him. You did it, she whispered. We did it, he replied. But just as they reached the end of the street, a voice called out behind them. Lucas! Charlotte! Wait! They turned to see a teenager, Timothy Cray, the boy who had led the bullying months ago, standing awkwardly, shoulders tense, hands in his pockets. I was awful to you, he said. Back at school. I didn't get it. I think I was scared of what I didn't understand. And that made me mean. I'm sorry. Lucas blinked. A long silence passed. Then he simply nodded. Thanks for saying that. Timothy gave a faint, grateful smile and walked away, head down, unsure of what to expect next. Charlotte looked at her son, her pride wordless. Yet even in that small exchange, something had shifted. The boy who once feared his voice now had the power to disarm cruelty with grace. As the final light of the day dipped behind the hills, the village of Whitfield seemed quieter, but not with ignorance. With reflection. Lucas, now walking with new confidence, turned to his mother. Do you think, maybe I could speak at the next county event? Charlotte smiled. I think they'd be lucky to hear you. And so, the silence that once surrounded Lucas did not return. In its place was a new kind of sound, one born from bravery, shaped by love, and carried forward by every child who had ever been told to sit quietly when they needed most to be heard.